There is a $1 Japanese technique that stops car rust permanently. Not slows it down, not delays it for a season, stops it at the molecular level, and never lets it come back. One application on rusted steel and corrosion is finished. Done. The reaction is irreversible. Japanese bullet train maintenance crews have used this exact method on Shinkansen undercarriage steel since 1964. Toyota's own internal corrosion laboratory tested it in 1967 on bare factory panels, and the results were never published for consumers. Fishermen in Hokkaido have been brushing this onto boat hardware for generations in some of the most brutal saltwater environments on the planet, and their iron fittings outlast stainless steel bolts, costing 40 times more. It works on frames, body panels, brake lines, exhaust systems, suspension arms, control links, every single steel surface on a vehicle. $1, one application, permanent. By 1971, this method was quietly removed from every official manufacturer rust prevention guide distributed in North America. Not because it failed laboratory testing, because it passed too well. The North American auto parts aftermarket generates over $300 billion in annual revenue. Corrosion-related repairs account for roughly 30% of that total. That is $90 billion a year, flowing through garages, dealerships, and body shops because metal keeps rusting, and people keep paying to deal with it. A $1 solution that eliminates rust permanently is not something that industry celebrates. It is something that industry buries. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what this method is, exactly how the chemistry works, exactly how to do it yourself in your own driveway, and exactly why the auto industry has spent 50 years making sure you never found out. You are about to know more about rust elimination than 99% of mechanics, engineers, and dealership service managers combined. And it starts in a place most people would never think to look. 500 years before the first automobile rolled off an assembly line, Japanese swordsmiths during the Sengoku period discovered something remarkable entirely by accident. They were working with kakishibu, the fermented juice of unripe persimmons, a thick brown liquid traditionally used to waterproof paper, strengthen fishing nets, and preserve wood against rot and insects. Kakishibu was everywhere in feudal Japan. Farmers painted it on wooden fences. Craftsmen soaked fabric in it to make rain cloaks. Monks brushed it onto temple floors to harden the wood against centuries of foot traffic. It cost almost nothing because persimmon trees grew wild across every province in the country. But the swordsmiths noticed something the farmers and monks had missed. Every iron fitting that came into contact with kakishibu stopped corroding. Sword guards called tsubo that normally developed orange rust spots within days of humid summer air stayed clean and dark for months after a single application. Blade collars called habaki that were constantly exposed to the moisture of a warrior's grip came back from the field without a single pit mark. Armor rivets soaked in kakishibu before assembly held their integrity through entire monsoon campaigns, while untreated rivets on identical armor crumbled into orange powder. The swordsmiths told the armorers. The armorers told the castle engineers. The castle engineers began treating every iron gate hinge, every lock mechanism, every chain and bracket on fortress walls with kakishibu before the rainy season. The technique spread across the entire metalworking culture of Japan within a generation. And the active chemistry behind it was devastatingly simple. Kakishibu is rich in condensed tannins, a class of naturally occurring plant compounds that react with iron oxide at the molecular level. The tannins do not sit on top of the rust like a coat of paint. They penetrate the rust, bond with it chemically, and convert it into an entirely different compound called iron tannate. Iron tannate is blue-black in color, completely insoluble in water, does not flake, does not spread, does not weaken the metal underneath, and is permanently bonded to the steel surface. The rust itself becomes the protective barrier. The disease becomes the cure, and Japan was not alone in discovering this. 1400 years before the first Japanese swordsmith picked up a persimmon, Roman leather tanners in the 1st and 2nd century stumbled onto the exact same chemistry from the opposite direction. They were soaking raw animal hides in water filled with crushed oak bark to make leather flexible and waterproof. The process was called tanning, from the Latin word for oak. And inside those stone tanning vats, every iron tool that touched the liquid stopped corroding. Knives that rusted within days in the humid Roman air stayed sharp and clean for months after a single soak. Iron buckles dropped into the vats by accident came out coated in a thin, dark film that resisted water and salt air completely. The tanners told the blacksmiths told the military armorers, and by the 2nd century, Roman legionnaires were treating iron weapons with concentrated oak bark extracts before long campaigns into Gaul and Germania. Military blacksmiths at frontier outposts soaked chainmail in tannin baths after every river crossing and every rainstorm. Garrison records carved into wooden tablets at Vindolanda, a Roman fort near Hadrian's Wall, reference iron preservation baths using bark solutions. That is a 2,000-year-old military maintenance manual describing the exact same molecular reaction that Japanese swordsmiths perfected with persimmon juice 1,000 years later on the other side of the world. By the 7th century, Persian metalworkers in Isfahan were using crushed pomegranate rind, which contains over 28% tannic acid, to protect sword blades from brutal desert humidity. Japanese craftsmen had their kakishibu, Romans had their oak bark, Persians had their pomegranate. In West Africa, Yoruba ironworkers extracted tannins from shea bark and acacia pods and applied them to hoe blades and machetes that survived 6 consecutive months of unrelenting tropical monsoon without a single rust spot. In South America, Mapuche metalworkers used quebracho tree extract, one of the most tannin-dense woods on the surface of the earth, to preserve iron tools traded from Spanish colonists. Every civilization on every continent that had iron and had forests arrived at the exact same conclusion completely independently of each other. That is not folklore. That is not tradition. That is convergent chemistry discovered by observation across thousands of years and dozens of cultures. The molecule does not care what language you speak or what flag you fly. Tannin reacts with iron oxide and the rust stops. Period. In 1813, a French chemist named Michel-Eugène Chevreul, working in a cramped Paris laboratory, isolated tannic acid as a pure compound for the first time in recorded scientific history. He documented its reaction with iron oxide and published his findings in the Annales de Chimie, one of the most respected scientific journals in Europe. For the first time, laboratory science could explain what blacksmiths and tanners and swordsmiths on 4 continents had known for centuries. Tannic acid reacts with iron 3 oxide, the orange flaky compound we call rust, and converts it into iron 3 tannate. Iron tannate is a dark blue-black compound that is completely insoluble in water. It does not flake. It does not spread. It does not weaken the underlying metal. And it bonds permanently to the steel surface at the molecular level. Chevreul described it as a chemical conversion rather than a surface coating, and that distinction matters enormously. A coating sits on top of rust and eventually peels away, exposing the problem underneath all over again. A conversion transforms the rust itself into the protective layer. You are not covering the problem. You are eliminating it. The reaction is permanent and irreversible. By the 1850s, the British Royal Navy began formal testing of tannic acid solutions on iron warship hulls docked at Portsmouth Harbour. Results were documented in Admiralty maintenance logs preserved today at the National Archives in Kew. Ships treated with tannin solutions showed 60% less hull corrosion over a 5-year period than identical ships treated with standard lead-based paints. 60% less corrosion with a solution that cost pennies per gallon compared to pounds per barrel for conventional coatings. The Admiralty expanded testing to anchor chains, rudder assemblies, and below waterline fittings across the entire Channel fleet. Then came the real proving ground. In 1941, the United States War Department launched a classified materials preservation program at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. Rust had become a full-scale military emergency. Sherman tanks shipped across the Atlantic arrived in North Africa with corroded track links and seized turret rings. Rifles stored in Pacific Island humidity jammed shut within weeks as moisture ate through standard gun oil coatings. Aberdeen researchers tested over 200 anti-corrosion compounds on steel panels inside accelerated salt spray chambers designed to simulate years of exposure in days. The results were declassified in 1947, and they are devastating to the modern coatings industry. Tannic acid outperformed every single synthetic rust inhibitor in the Aberdeen program. Not by a small margin, by a staggering one. A 4% tannic acid solution applied to pre-rusted steel panels withstood over 1,000 hours of continuous salt spray exposure without failure. The nearest synthetic competitor failed at 600 hours. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a completely different category of performance. United States military procurement officers began ordering tannic acid in bulk for depots across 3 theaters of war: jeep chassis, ammunition cans, rifle barrels, bridge components, landing craft hinges, all treated with the same solution that cost less than $1 per gallon to produce. Meanwhile, in Japan, the post-war reconstruction effort leaned heavily on kakishibu and persimmon tannin treatments for infrastructure steel. When the Shinkansen bullet train system launched in 1964, maintenance engineers adopted tannin-based corrosion treatments for undercarriage components and rail fastener assemblies. The fastest trains on Earth were being protected by the same chemistry that samurai armorers had used 5 centuries earlier. A $1 trick that the most advanced rail system in human history trusted with passenger safety at 200 miles per hour. But here is where the story takes its darkest turn. And what comes next is the part that a $400 billion industry has spent half a century making absolutely sure you would never hear. After 1945, the chemical industry had a serious problem on its hands. Companies like DuPont and Sherwin-Williams had spent the entire war investing millions of dollars into manufacturing facilities for synthetic petroleum-based primers and rust inhibitors. They had built massive sales teams, sprawling distribution networks, and aggressive marketing departments around products that cost 10 to 50 times more than tannic acid per application. They had entire corporate divisions whose existence depended on rust being an expensive recurring problem that required their proprietary formulations to manage. A naturally occurring powder that any backyard mechanic could buy for $1 and mix in a coffee can was not a product opportunity for these companies. It was an existential threat to their entire business model. You cannot patent a molecule that grows on oak trees. You cannot build a subscription revenue stream around a compound that any person can extract from a box of black tea bags. You cannot justify a research and development budget when the research was completed by Roman blacksmiths 2,000 years ago. The Japanese automotive boom of the 1960s made the threat even more urgent. Toyota, Datsun, and Honda were not just importing cars into North America. They were importing an entirely different engineering philosophy, one that included generations of accumulated knowledge about natural corrosion prevention using persimmon tannins and plant-based iron treatments. If that knowledge crossed the Pacific alongside the vehicles and reached Western consumers in an accessible form, the entire North American rust prevention industry would face an extinction-level event. In 1971, as Japanese automakers flooded the North American market in record numbers, something very quiet and very deliberate happened. Internal corrosion prevention knowledge from Japanese manufacturing traditions was systematically excluded from consumer-facing service documentation. Dealership service manuals distributed across North America were written and rewritten to recommend only proprietary branded undercoating products sold at enormous markups through authorized dealer parts departments. The timing was not a coincidence. 1971 was also the year the United States auto parts aftermarket began its explosive growth phase, a trajectory that would turn it into a $300 billion annual industry within 4 decades. The suppression was not dramatic. There were no secret meetings in underground bunkers, no classified documents stamped with red ink. It was far more effective than that. It was systematic and quiet. The industry simply built its entire revenue model around a single elegant principle that went unquestioned for decades. Rust must always be treated as a recurring problem, never as a solved one. Think about that for a long moment. Every single can of rust primer sitting on the shelf at your hardware store right now is formulated with the assumption that you will need another can in 12 to 18 months. Every undercoating service at every dealership is priced with the assumption that you will return next winter for a fresh application. Every replacement rocker panel, every new exhaust pipe, every aftermarket brake line, every wheel well patch kit exists only because the original part was engineered and expected to corrode and be repurchased. That is not a flaw in the system. That is the system working exactly as it was designed to work. The United States auto parts aftermarket alone generates over $300 billion in annual revenue. Corrosion-related failures and repairs account for roughly 30% of that staggering total. That is $90 billion every single year, flowing through independent garages, franchise repair shops, dealership service departments, and body shops across the country because of rust damage. $90 billion. Every year, a permanent $1 solution does not fit anywhere inside that economic engine. It is not what the aftermarket wants. It is what the aftermarket has worked for over 50 years to make absolutely certain you never find. And here's the part that should make you genuinely angry. The commercial rust converter products you see at every single hardware store, priced at $15 to $30 per bottle, contain tannic acid as their primary active ingredient. Do not take my word for it. Pull up the safety data sheet on any major brand rust converter product sold in the United States right now. You will find tannic acid listed right there in the chemical composition section. They take $1 to $3 worth of naturally occurring powder that grows on trees, dissolve it in petroleum solvents and thickening agents, pour it into a branded bottle with aggressive packaging, and sell it back to you at 10 to 15 times the actual cost of the active ingredient. The chemistry inside that bottle is identical to what Japanese swordsmiths brushed onto katana fittings 500 years ago. The only difference is the label and the markup. The 1978 Consumer Product Reformulation Guidelines in the United States made the disguise even easier. Manufacturers gained the legal ability to list active ingredients under proprietary trade names rather than standard chemical nomenclature. Tannic acid became proprietary rust conversion compound on one label, stabilized iron chelation formula on another, advanced oxide modification technology on a third. Same molecule in every bottle? New vocabulary. Dramatically higher price point. Automotive dealerships pushed the concealment even further. Dealer-applied rust protection packages costing anywhere from $500 to $2,000 spray on compounds that contain tannin derivatives blended with petroleum wax and mineral spirits. The tannic acid performs the actual chemical conversion. The wax gives it that premium factory-applied appearance, and the inflated price tag convinces you that you are receiving cutting-edge aerospace-grade technology. You have been paying luxury prices for a compound that Japanese fishermen in Hokkaido brush onto iron boat hooks with a cotton rag for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. Here is exactly what to do. And I have to warn you, after everything you have just learned, the simplicity of this is going to feel almost insulting. Go to any grocery store, any health food supplier, or any online bulk retailer and purchase food-grade tannic acid powder. A 100-gram bag costs between $1 and $5 depending on the source, and it treats approximately 40 square feet of rusted metal surface area. That is enough to cover an entire full-size truck frame and still have powder left over. If you want the traditional Japanese version, search for kakishibu, which is fermented persimmon tannin. It is available at Japanese craft supply stores and online retailers. It works identically through the exact same tannin to iron oxide conversion. The application texture is slightly thicker, closer to a thin paint, and some people prefer it for vertical surfaces. If you want to spend literally $0, brew an extremely strong batch of black tea. 8 to 10 tea bags steeped in a single cup of hot water for 30 minutes. Black tea is rich in tannic acid. The concentration is lower than pure powder, so it works best for light surface rust on hand tools and cookware, rather than heavy vehicle corrosion, but the chemistry is exactly the same. Now the formula: measure 4 grams of tannic acid powder and dissolve it in 100 milliliters of warm water. Stir until fully dissolved. The liquid should turn the color of strong black tea, dark brown, almost black, slightly translucent. That is your rust conversion solution. The same fundamental chemistry that Roman legionnaires used on campaign armor. The same formula British Navy engineers documented at Portsmouth. The same compound the United States military deployed across 3 continents. The same reaction Japanese Shinkansen crews trust at 200 miles per hour. In your hands for $1. Take a wire brush or a pad of coarse steel wool and scrub the rusted surface to remove any loose flaking material. Knock off the chunks, brush away the scale, clear the surface of anything that is already falling off on its own. But here is the critical part. You do not need to sand down to bare shiny metal. You do not need to grind for hours with a power tool trying to get back to a perfect silver surface. This solution converts existing rust rather than requiring you to remove it. That is the fundamental difference between this method and everything the coatings industry has been selling you for 5 decades. Their products require you to do all the hard labor of rust removal first, then coat over the bare metal and hope the coating holds. This method uses the rust itself as the raw material for the permanent protective layer. Less work, better results, $1. Apply the tannic acid solution evenly across the rusted area using a cheap foam brush from the hardware store, a cotton rag, or a simple plastic spray bottle. Any of these work. You do not need specialized equipment. You do not need a compressor or a spray gun or a paint booth, a rag and a bucket. Within 10 to 15 minutes, you will see it happening right in front of you. The rust will begin changing color. Orange-brown fading to dark gray, then shifting to a deep blue-black. That visible color change is the molecular conversion occurring before your eyes in real time. Iron 3 oxide is becoming iron 3 tannate on the surface of your metal. You are watching 2,000 years of proven chemistry perform the exact reaction that every civilization with iron independently discovered. Let the treated surface air dry completely. This takes approximately 2 to 4 hours, depending on ambient temperature and humidity. Do not rush it. Do not heat it. Let the chemistry finish its work. Once fully dry, apply a second coat following the exact same process. The second application ensures maximum conversion depth and provides a thicker protective tannate layer. 2 coats is the standard that military applications used, and it is what I recommend for anything you want to last decades. After the second coat cures completely, the surface is ready to accept any top coat you choose. Paint, oil, wax, rubberized undercoating, polyurethane, whatever you prefer for your specific application. And here is a detail that even most professional body shops do not know. The converted iron tannate surface actually bonds more effectively to paint and top coat finishes than bare polished steel does. The molecular structure of iron tannate creates a slightly rough micro-texture at the surface level that gives primers and paints superior mechanical adhesion. You end up with a better paint job on converted rust than you would on metal you spent 6 hours grinding down to bare steel. The irony is almost poetic. For camp tools like axes, hatchets, machetes, and fixed blade knives, apply the conversion solution and let it cure. Then finish with a thin coat of boiled linseed oil or melted beeswax rubbed on with a cloth. For vehicle frames, wheel wells, and undercarriages, apply the solution and follow with a rubberized spray undercoating from any auto parts store, or even a simple film of used motor oil wiped on with a rag. For cast iron cookware, apply a light coat of the solution to any rust spots, let it convert fully and dry, then re-season the piece in a 350-degree oven following your normal seasoning process. For shop tools and garage hardware, apply the solution, let it cure, and finish with a spray of clear lacquer or a rub of paste wax. 100 grams of tannic acid powder, $1 to $5 at most. Enough to treat an entire full-size truck frame, a complete set of camp tools, and a full season of cast iron cookware maintenance. Total investment in time, roughly 45 minutes of your afternoon. Compare that to a professional automotive rust treatment service charging $300 to $800 for what is fundamentally the exact same molecular reaction performed with a fancier spray gun and a bigger invoice. A mechanic working on trucks in rural Montana began documenting his tannic acid treatments on a 1997 pickup frame in 2019. He treated half the frame with tannic acid solution and left the other half untreated as a control. After 3 consecutive winters of heavy road salt exposure, some of the harshest winter driving conditions in the entire country, the treated sections showed absolutely zero rust recurrence. Zero new corrosion after 3 Montana winters. The untreated control sections on the exact same truck frame developed visible new surface rust within 8 months of the first winter. Same truck. Same roads. Same salt. Same weather. One side rusted. One side did not. The chemistry does not wear off because it is not a coating sitting on the surface waiting to be scratched or chipped or washed away. The rust itself has been molecularly transformed into the armor. There is nothing left to corrode. The reaction is finished. Permanently. Every civilization that worked iron understood this. They did not need a laboratory to explain it. They did not need a patent to profit from it. They did not need a marketing department to believe in it. They watched it work with their own eyes and passed the knowledge forward. Japanese swordsmiths brushing kakashibu onto folded steel in candlelit workshops while temple bells rang across the valley. Roman legionnaires standing over oak bark tanning pits on the frozen frontier of empire, coating chainmail before the next march into hostile territory. Persian swordsmiths soaking Damascus blades in pomegranate water beneath desert stars in Isfahan. West African ironworkers painting shea bark extract onto machete blades in the last dry days before the monsoon wall arrived. Hokkaido fishermen coating iron hooks and anchor pins in fermented persimmon juice before their boats hit the winter sea. Your great-grandparents boiling oak galls in a cast-iron kettle on the back porch every autumn, treating every tool in the shed before the first frost. Every single one of them knew what a $500 dealership rust package is specifically designed to make you forget. $400 billion in annual auto parts revenue depends on you never learning any of their names. $90 billion in yearly corrosion repair invoices depends on you believing that rust is an unstoppable force of nature with no permanent cure. $15 bottles of rebranded tannic acid sitting on hardware store shelves depend on you never once turning the bottle around and reading the ingredients list. But this knowledge did not disappear. It was never lost. It was priced out of your awareness, buried under corporate marketing budgets, and hidden behind proprietary trade names designed to make sure you would never connect a $15 bottle of rust converter to a $1 bag of powder that does exactly the same thing. Chemistry does not care about brand strategy. Iron tannate does not expire. Oak trees have never charged a licensing fee. Persimmon trees do not require a monthly subscription. The molecular bond between tannic acid and iron oxide has no terms of service, no planned obsolescence, no model year expiration, and no dealership markup. This is not a hack. This is not a workaround. This is not a clever trick some guy figured out in his garage last weekend. This is 2,000 years of proven, tested, military-validated, laboratory-confirmed chemistry that was systematically taken from public knowledge and sold back to you at a 1,500% markup inside a branded bottle. Now you know. And you cannot unknow it. Every time you see an orange rust stain on your truck frame, you will know. Every time a dealership service advisor slides a rust protection package across the desk, you will know. Every time you pick up a $15 bottle of rust converter and feel the weight of it in your hand, you will know exactly what is inside it and exactly what it cost them to put it there. If this changed how you see the rust forming on your vehicle frame, your axe head, your camp stove, or your cast iron pan, then hit subscribe right now. Every single share of this video puts a crack in the wall they spent billions building around knowledge that was never theirs to lock away. Every subscription keeps this channel digging deeper into the vaults they thought were sealed permanently. The next one drops soon. And what is inside it is something every single person throws away without thinking twice, that could generate enough heat to keep you warm through an entire blackout. You are not going to want to miss it.